This is Dr. Frances Wills, the Superintendent of Schools in Putnam Valley School District. And today I have with me Jennifer Stengle from the Cornell Cooperative Extension to help us look around at our trees here at the elementary school to talk about the project that we have under consideration. It's an energy project that would propose solar panels here at the elementary school. There is also a geothermal aspect to the project here at elementary, and solar in other parts of the school district. As we have progressed in learning about the project, we understand that because we have so many trees around our elementary school, the solar project could have an obstacle, and that is the shade from the trees. We also learned that we have some rather mature trees very close to the building. So that also creates a problem for us. But in order to get a further understanding and consideration of just what the issues are, I've asked Ms. Stengle to help us to further understand about this notion of the trees and what would happen if we had to cut back on these trees for the purpose of this project. Ms. Stengle?
Great. Well, one of the things, if you would look out into this forest, you do notice a lot of mature oaks, some of which are very close to the building. So that is potentially a concern. A tree isn't really a hazard unless it has something that it can fall on. And in this case, you do have building close by, and children are using this area as well. However, these are oak trees. They're in pretty good shape. They are suffering with a little bit of soil compaction beneath them, but that's not the end of the world. They do have a lot of pristine, undisturbed soil behind them. The issue here, though, is that you have a couple of environmental concerns. One is that if you were to remove them, you would want to replace something in this area. And anything you would put in this area, of course, would then have to be short enough so that it doesn't shade the solar panels that you wish to put in later. So that would mean some of our native understory trees and some of our very large shrubs that would fill that in. Doing that would also then provide a greater biodiversity. And one of the issues we're facing here in Putnam County is that all of our forests are a single-aged forest. All of the trees grew up post-agricultural era, and they're all about the same age. And because of deer, we don't really have any youngster trees coming up in the mid-size. So putting these younger trees in or smaller trees in would really help to improve the biodiversity of the area. That said, we have deer. So anything you put in is going to have to be protected from the deer for quite a while. But these things, any trees or shrubs that you would put in would really create this kind of wall of vegetation and offer nesting sites and forage foods for some important insects and pollinators and the birds that eat them. So it has the possibility of being a very dynamic space in the long run, and a teaching space, if you wish to put it that way. One of the other things that we noticed about this landscape when we did an original assessment of the soil is that you do have acidic soils. So that's going to mean that you need to use plants well adapted to soils in a lower pH range. And the other thing I did notice as well is that it's very pristine site. Very few invasive plants have ever reached the site. So that's important down the road in thinking about any contractors or even any equipment that comes in. You want to make sure that that equipment is not introducing a new problem. So if you look at this site, you see at this time of the year, lots of oak leaves covering the forest floor. They are suppressing weed growth. If we remove the forest and suddenly there's sunlight on that forest floor, in a perfect world, up would come our replacement native species. But because of the deer, they'll come along and munch away. If native species were used to repopulate this area, again, I mentioned they would have to be protected from the deer. But if not protected from the deer, that's when the invasive species get their foot in the door, and that's what you want to really guard against.
So what are some of these invasive species?
Well, some of the things that we see in our area as we drive up and down Oscowana Lake Road or Peekskill Hollow Road is you'll notice Japanese stilt grass, which is an invasive grass, easily spread by seed. And it creates a carpet. And this fall, it was carpeting all the sides of the roads, and it's invaded many people's lawns. But as I look around your whole school site, I don't find a lot of Japanese stilt grass. So that makes me think that you are doing your own mowing, you're using your own equipment here. So. And it's good to keep that way and ensure that any contractor who brings any kind of equipment in really cleans their wheels and equipment.
That's very important information for us. Can you help us understand how far back we would be cutting if we did this? Can you take a look here and guide the community as they look around?
There were a few marker flags placed back there, and it's looking to me about 60 to 70 feet back there. I don't know if you can pick them up on the camera. They're pink marking tags that run parallel to this wing of the school and all along the back of the school. So that would mean all the intervening trees would get cut out.
Would get cut out. So.
And as you look through that forest, you also don't see a lot of young trees. Here and there's a young maple or a young oak. If you wish to keep those trees, recognize that if you don't prune them down, if you don't cut them down, they will in the future become too tall and shade the solar panels again. Right. So thinking about the sustainability aspect of it, in a sense, it makes sense to get them out in the first place so that you don't have to come back in, disturb all the newly established vegetation to take them out. So,
So it's a major project. Now, these are the tall trees near the building that would also have to be cut.
Right. And if you can look up, some of them have lost major limbs. Some of them have a few dead limbs on them that should either be pruned or addressed in some fashion. Those present hazards. But otherwise, oak trees are not known to particularly fall over, but you can never say never. You know, a windstorm or a severe ice storm, you always have some concern about that. But you do have a variety of red oaks, white oaks, and a number of different maples and other hardwood species and nut species throughout the forest. So what's good about this is that just beyond that clear cutting area, you still have well-established forest land. So you have that buffer and that biodiversity.
Yes.
To increase biodiversity, one of the things you are looking for is a variation in habitat. So by creating this lower story area with ground covers, so they could be seeded ground covers, you will really increase bird life and insect life in the area.
So we talked a little bit about carbon offset. Can you help explain that a little bit so that our public understands that when you put a solar array in, there is a carbon offset for the trees?
Right, you probably understand this even better than I, because my area of expertise is horticulture and natural resources. Right. So the idea is that while these trees are cycling carbon within them and within the leaves that fall to the ground and become part of the soil, you have a solar array that is now producing energy for the school that is going to offset any other form of energy you would be importing into the school, so fossil fuels.
As far as sustainability is concerned, we would have at least a sense that we're creating a sustainable energy resource.
Right. With all the checks and balances that go with solar. And again, this is outside my expertise. Yes. The solar has its own cost as well, and that where it's produced, it has a global effect. So it is something
always
to be weighed.
These upsides and downsides of all of this. All right, I think we'll take a little walk now to see another part of the school environment. Here we are at a classroom, an outdoor classroom, that is being constructed here at the elementary school. And we've got some staff members who have been very active in making this happen. Ryan Odell and Bruce Ludovici from the high school. We also have our custodial staff, a maintenance staff, Mr. Bellino, facilities director, who are actively involved in putting together this classroom. We're looking at the question, why is nature important to us, as an essential question for our elementary school. And you can see how beautifully these benches have been designed. Once again, you'll see some pink flags in the back, which show how some of the trees will have to be cut as far back as 60 feet, as we mentioned before. We were going to have an all-weather chalkboard here so that this classroom can actually be used as a regular classroom. And I'm sure there'll be a number of lessons taught here, whether in literature or science, math, history. There are so many possibilities for that. So I'd like to ask Ms. Stengle about her views in this area.
Well, right now, as you look here, stand here, you do have a shaded area. With the marking flags that far back, you get the sense that this is going to be in the sun at some point in the future if the solar panels go in. So at that point, you might consider, again, understory trees, some trees that are going to grow into the 30-foot range at their maturity. There's a number of them. They're native, some of them are flowering, some of them are not. And they are going to give you some shade in this area and really that transitional space. You come from the school to this teaching space, and then you have these wonderful woodlands behind you that they then can still explore. And as we were talking about this periphery area becoming repopulated with native plants and perennials and other grasses, that other type of ecosystem that they'd have an opportunity to explore and see all of the life that moves into those areas. So you then have this beautiful woodlands, you have these beautiful kind of almost meadow lands, and then down below you have that wonderful pond. So you have a variety of areas to explore with the children. Again, I mentioned that when you remove all of these trees, you'll suddenly have a lot of leaves, which are covering the soil. As those are naturally going to be disturbed by the process of removing trees and replanting those understory trees and shrubs, there is a type of seed mix that can be strewn on the ground that will help to hold the soil in place, but that includes native grasses as well as flowering perennials and annuals that will help to establish the soil and prevent invasive species from moving in. So again, those young trees that you put in will need some protection from the deer until they get above browsing height, the 12-foot range. So that's another learning experience for youth, to put trees in, to watch them grow, and to see all these new changes in the landscape. So
yes, I can see lessons there in math and actually measurement and observation for science. Yeah. I think there's a great deal of study that we can take part in as part of this project, which the Board of Education is very interested in. They want to have a K through 12 curriculum that we can develop as part of this whole energy performance contract project and proposal. So at this point, I'm seeing, and I'm sure we're all seeing in the community, that we have a responsibility when we take on these kinds of projects to understand the impact of the project on the environment and what our role will be to ensure that we have a sustainable, environmentally friendly result from this project.
Yes. And then the ongoing stewardship of once you make that decision, how do you take care of this, that these all grow to their full potential and then give you what you're asking for them. Yes. So we don't just put them in the ground and say they're done. There is some ongoing maintenance and care. Yeah.
So should this project come to eventuality, and we expect it to, we will be sure that our community gets to talk about and understand what will happen when we do cut trees. If we have the solar, we will have to cut trees, and that we are fully aware of what our responsibility and stewardship is going forward with that. Thank you very, very much.
Very welcome, and let me know how I can help.
Appreciate it.